On Election Day, the polls are open to voters from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. As a member of the poll worker team, however, that day begins long before the first voter arrives and well after the last voter has voted. So, what is a typical election day like for a poll worker?
It is election morning. The poll worker team arrives at the polling place no later than 6 a.m. The team helps the precinct supervisor unload the supplies that were picked up from the elections office yesterday. Who is the team? The precinct supervisor is the person in charge of all activity at a polling place. They are ultimately responsible for the performance of the precinct on election day. The voting system specialist, or VSS, is responsible for the voting equipment at the polling place. They perform the opening and closing procedures for the DS200 optical scanner as well as the express vote. They also assist voters with ballot issues throughout the day. The attendant assists the VSS during opening and closing procedures. Once the polls open, they assist voters with ballot issues throughout the day. The EVID specialist is responsible for the opening and closing of the electronic poll book known as the EVID. The specialist also verifies voter eligibility and may complete paperwork with the assistance of the elections office phone bank when needed. The EVID operator assists the EVID specialist during the opening and closing procedures. Once the polls are open, they verify voter eligibility using the EVID unit. The ballot distributor is responsible for verifying and reconciling ballots during opening and closing procedures. Throughout the day, they collect voting passes and issue a paper ballot to all eligible voters that have been processed by the EVID operators. The poll deputy is stationed outside and, in accordance with Florida statutes, maintains law and order at the polling place. They set up the outside of the polling place and assist voters throughout the day as needed. What equipment is used at the polling place? An EVID is an electronic poll book used to verify voter eligibility. After being located on the EVID, voters sign a signature pad and are issued a voting pass, which they use to receive a paper ballot. A DS200 is an optical ballot scanner. After marking their ballot at a privacy booth, a voter will insert their ballot into the DS200, where the ballot is read, tabulated, and deposited into the ballot box. The express vote is a universal voting system for voters with disabilities. This system is a combination of paper-based and touchscreen voting. Let's watch the poll worker team as they prepare the polling place for voting. The team enters the polling room where the precinct supervisor calls the phone bank to let them know that they are in the building. They read aloud the poll worker oath and each team member signs the payroll sheet. Then the precinct supervisor gives the EVID specialist and the VSS their supplies. At this point, many activities begin to happen all at the same time. Each team member has specific assignments to complete before 7 a.m. Let's focus on three main areas of setup: the EVIDs, the voting equipment, and the ballots. Let's begin with the EVID setup. The EVID specialist begins to open their equipment according to the step-by-step procedures read to them by the EVID operator. The specialist uses the supplies received from the precinct supervisor and from their supply tote to set up their equipment and their EVID stations. The check-in station EVID is located on a table near the entrance of the polling room, while the help desk EVID is located on a table designated for the EVID specialist to process voters requiring paperwork and receive phone bank assistance when needed. Supplies are distributed to each EVID station by following the step-by-step instructions listed in the Setting Up EVID Station Procedures. Next, let's look at the voting equipment setup. Voting equipment preparation begins with the attendant reading step-by-step instructions to the VSS from their manual. The DS200 is located near the exit of the polling room, where it is plugged in and prepared to receive ballots. After designating the place for voters to wait to scan their ballot, the VSS and attendant begin to set up the express vote. The express vote is located on a table near an electrical outlet and is set up for use. Privacy booths are set up in an area where sufficient space is available in the polling room, allowing for a smooth flow of voter traffic. A ballot marking pen is placed in each booth. Finally, let's look at the ballots table setup. The paper ballots are brought to the polling place election morning by the precinct supervisor. The ballots are placed on a table located between the EVID check-in station and the privacy booths. The ballot distributor verifies the seal numbers and the quantity of ballots. When verification is complete, the ballot distributor sets up the ballots table. Meanwhile, the poll deputy has been outside setting up all signage and parking areas following the instructions listed in their manual. The precinct supervisor sets up the information table near the entrance to the polling room. They also set up their table, which is positioned in a location where they will be able to oversee all activities in the polling room. When the polling place has been completely set up, the precinct supervisor uses the cell phone at the help desk to call the phone bank and report that the polling place is ready for voting. At 7 a.m., the precinct supervisor announces to all poll workers that the polls are open. Let the voting begin. The poll deputy greets voters as they approach the polling place and reminds them to have their photo and signature identification ready. Once inside the polling room, the voter sees instructional materials on a table near the entrance. These materials are helpful when a voter needs to review a sample ballot, learn how to scan their voted ballot, or read important information regarding polling place etiquette. When ready, the voter proceeds to the check-in here station, where they are greeted by the EVID operator. The operator asks for the voter's photo and signature identification and verifies the voter standing in front of them is the voter on the identification. The operator then locates the voter's record on the EVID. Once located, the operator verifies the voter's information on the EVID with the ID provided. When ready, the EVID operator has the voter sign the signature pad and compares the signature on the screen with the signature on the identification. When the signature is accepted, the voter's unique voting pass prints on the EVID printer. The operator directs the voter to take their voting pass to the ballot distributor located at the ballots table. The ballot distributor issues the appropriate paper ballot as indicated on the voting pass. The voter is given their ballot inside a secrecy sleeve and is directed to a privacy booth where they will mark their ballot. After marking their ballot, the voter proceeds to the DS200 optical scanner. An attendant at the DS200 greets the voter and asks them to insert their ballot into the DS200. The DS200 reads and tabulates the ballot, drops the ballot into the ballot box, and displays a message indicating the voting process is complete. The attendant collects the secrecy sleeve from the voter while thanking them for voting and offering them an I voted sticker. Sometimes a voter will require extra processing due to a name or address change, not having proper identification, requiring assistance in voting, or having been issued an absentee ballot. These situations are handled at the help desk. The EVID specialist at the help desk makes any required changes, contacts the phone bank when necessary, and completes paperwork. Eligible voters are directed to the ballots table to receive their ballot while the precinct supervisor accompanies all provisional voters to the ballots table. At 7 p.m., the precinct supervisor announces the polls are closed and has the poll deputy get in line behind the last voter. Once the last voter has voted and exited the polling room, the closing process may begin. Each team member has specific duties to complete, but the whole team participates in the closing efforts. Let's watch as the entire team works together to close the polling place. As in the opening of the polls, many activities are going on at the same time during the closing of the polls. Once again, we'll focus on three main areas: the ballots, the voting equipment, and the EVIDs. Let's begin with the reconciliation of ballots. The VSS and precinct supervisor remove all ballots from the ballot box. They take the voted ballots to an empty table where the ballot distributor completes the necessary forms, accounts for all ballots, and prepares the ballots for return to the collection site. Once the ballots have been reconciled, the ballot distributor repacks their supplies and leaves them on their table for the VSS to collect when ready. Next, let's look at the closing of the voting equipment. Once the ballots have been removed, the VSS and attendant follow step-by-step instructions for closing the DS200 and modeming results to the counting center. The DS200 is then prepared for pickup by the elections office. The VSS and attendant also follow step-by-step instructions for closing the express vote and preparing it for return to the elections office. The VSS repacks their supplies in the VSS tote and collects all other items for return in the DS200 ballot box once prepared by the ballot distributor and poll deputy. Lastly, let's look at the closing of the EVIDs. The EVID operator reads step-by-step closing instructions to the specialist. Each unit is closed and voting pass totals tapes are given to the ballot distributor for ballot reconciliation. Once closed, the units and their accessories are returned to the EVID case. The case is then prepared for pickup by the elections office. The EVID team repacks their supplies in the EVID supply tote and prepares it for pickup by the elections office. Meanwhile, the poll deputy has dismantled all outside setup and reported to the precinct supervisor for any additional duties. Privacy booths are disassembled and packed by team members assigned by the precinct supervisor. When closing procedures have been completed, the precinct supervisor packs their supplies and authorizes the locking and sealing of all other equipment and supplies. The precinct supervisor surveys the polling room to verify the room has been restored to its original state or better. At this time, all poll workers exit the polling place together. The election team loads the return items into the vehicle being used by the VSS and precinct supervisor to transport items to the collection site.
I hope this overview has helped you understand what your experience might be like at a polling place on Election Day.